That was the other thing, is that the longest time I had always assumed that shrunken heads were more like cannibalism, that they were more like these kind of blood libels and sort of
They are.
myths
They are.
against
They're not.
against indigenous peoples.
No, no. They're natives fighting other natives, and you take the heart of the native. That shows the sign of that you're getting their courage. But you also take their head, and shrunken heads then are your trophy of killing another
Yeah, it
native.
turns out like shrunken and that's the thing. It's like that's one of these weird gray areas of colonization where it's like it's one of those things where shrunken heads do exist. There's like a historical
Yep.
there's clear anthropological evidence for
Absolutely.
their existing.
Yeah.
But the problem is that for white not necessarily the colonizers themselves, but people in continental Europe who learn about these things, and then everyone wants a shrunken head of their own. Is like, what a morbid thing to have in my library. And I do know that like there was a whole sort of cottage industry of like fake shrunken heads.
Yes. My uncle Richie had a fake. It was horrible looking. He had this fake shrunken head. I think it was fake. And he used to hang it from his dresser, like. And I look at the thing.
His dresser in his bedroom?
Yeah.
How could he sleep at night?
It didn't bother him. But the point is that, yes, it was very popular to have those.
And that's the thing, is that, it's like at a certain, and that's what I meant about the wondering about the line between between head hunting and shrunken heads at being a anthropologically observable practice.
Yes.
And the clear extent to which colonization and imperialism have created a mercantile system, and also the need for like a rationality, the need to like almost like play up, almost like a blood libel, this idea of the inherent savagery of people. Because it's like, I know in these sort of blood libels do appear all the time, and like the most popular blood libel is cannibalism, especially if you're a colonizer. Like the ability to portray indigenous peoples as breaking like one of the major taboos, which is the idea that like it is completely savage for a human to consume another human being. If you can propagate the idea that these people lack that basic conception of like not being able to eat another human being, that they lack even the basic moral capacity to not do it, then it becomes, it's part of the rationalizing function of white man's burden. We need to be there in order to stop these abominable practices. And so that's the thing, like, I know shrunken heads have more of an anthropological basis in factuality than cannibalism, where in the case of cannibalism, there's like, at least for like head hunting cannibalism, at least for the idea of like tribes hunting other tribes for food, there's virtually, like, my understanding is that there's virtually no anthropological evidence for this, at least material evidence. Like, there's lots of reports and lots of reports by colonists, and again it gets into the question
I have to reread In Search of the Primitive. I can't remember when it was published, but I was given to me by a friend back in the 70s. 72 or 71. He gave me to as a gift because he finished reading it. It's a remarkable read. And they go through the process of shrunken heads.
Yeah, and we do see the shrunken head process in this movie. Yeah. And again, like, I guess we should get off the question of like blood libels, but but I guess it was important because it's, again, that was the thing. It's like
they spent time going over, and they did.
Yeah, it's a fairly well, like, for the time, it's a fairly well researched movie.
Yeah.
In terms of trying to accurately portray the
Javaro Indians.
But yeah, it's a fairly well-researched movie. I mean, at least just for that conceit. Like, I don't know if anything else in terms of, like, how the rituals are carried out. Like, I wouldn't know. But I guess, like, that's the thing, is that, like, I was thoroughly bored by the movie, but just merely having a film of this kind just sort of... And that's the thing, is, like, what we were talking about, is that, like, it seems fairly clear that this hundreds-year-old vendetta is thoroughly justified.
Where did the money come from?
Exactly,
right?
and that's the thing, is like, how many times have I asked you, like, where are these scientists in these movies getting the money to live in these palaces? At least in this one, it's like, oh, because these so-called scientists are just actually the failed, effete sons of
Right.
industrialists who made all their money off of
Well, you get
stolen
like things
labor
like
and land.
the Wolfman. A lot of these are earned or inherited money, like
Right.
land.
They're fail sons.
Land, it's a fealty, right?
Right, exactly.
And so a lot of these movies are like that. That the money is old money. It's money that is handed down, or it's in actual land.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because, like, so we have this problem where it's like we're sympathizing with the natives, which is really the only way to keep the movie interesting. But obviously, the ultimate resolution of the movie is the breaking of the curse. And that's the weird thing, is that, like, so the four skulls of the title is, in the beginning of the movie, Jonathan Drake wakes up in his armchair after passing out asleep after a long night of reading academic journals and smoking his pipe or whatever he was doing. But yeah, he wakes up in the night and he kind of has a delirious vision of these two skulls flying at him after his brother Kenneth Drake is killed. He's the third victim in the line before the entire line is cut off. Apparently his daughter is exempt, but after his brother is killed in the Amazon...
Yeah, how's that work?
like, his brother Kenneth that gets killed in the Amazon, so then he sees three skulls, and then he does the really dumb thing, which is that he goes down to stay in his brother's house for the funeral, to make sure that the body is taken care of, but then he himself becomes the next victim.
Right.
So the four...
Because the tie keeps taking the heads.
Right, exactly. So, like, basically what the villains do is that they poison the male heirs, they cut off the heads, and they make shrunken heads out of them. And we do actually see, like, the fairly morbid details of the process. And, like, none of it too explicit, but morbid enough for the time. Like, we see Kenneth Drake's disembodied head. A very realistic prop.
Yes,
it looks very good.
They are very good props.
I'm surprised you didn't say there goes the budget when you saw the head. Because that must have been where most of the budget went, is just that head.
And the shrunken heads, when they're prepared. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of them, or even when the
Yeah, we see like him...
When his brother's head that gets prepared.
Yeah, we see the whole thing. We
Yeah.
see his lips getting sewn shut. We see the skin getting... We see the head being boiled, presumably to embalm the skin. We see the skin being removed, and then the skull being cleaned. Very morbid stuff. We see, like,
the only problem is when they take the skull, it's a skull. It should be skull with the eyes in it and with
it should
blood
have
on it.
it should have viscera.
Right.
And,
It should look like they could have done something better with that. They just didn't do it that way. So.
Right. And, it's like it's like an idiot's guide to making a shrunken head.
That's exactly how they do it. They have to go. If I'm not mistaken, you go from the back and you have to dissect all the way around, and you fold back, and then when you come to the eyelids, which is tricky. You have to be able to get the eyeball away from the eyelid, and you have the eyelids. It's really an amazing process.
And this is the thing, is that, like, again, like, the movie itself wasn't very interesting, but it's like, I'm just thinking about, like, obviously making shrunken heads out of your enemies is probably not the most productive thing to do with your time, but just knowing that it was an authentic practice of indigenous peoples... like, I just have to say that, like, you have to appreciate, like, the surgical diligence of just these indigenous people, like, the sort of ritualistic...
And how it arose.
Right, exactly. Just, like, the devotion that it would take to, like, figuring out, like, and passing down for generations that this is how you do this thing. It kind of,
Come here, Johnny. I want to show you something.
Yeah, like, could you imagine, like, the disappointed witch doctor, like, oh, my mentee just cannot get he cannot get the incision right. All he wants to do is play the predecessor of soccer. What's soccer? You'll find out in a couple centuries. The white people will take that from us.